the board of the Chandler Unified
Yes.
School District have policies that prohibited certain types of physical contact between students and teachers.
Yes.
And could you explain what those policies were in 2021 and 2022?
I don't know that I could explain them. I mean, yeah, I don't know that I could explain them thoroughly.
Well, explain them as best you can.
Inappropriate sexual touching would definitely be identified as an action that you shouldn't do. Touching that would be intrusive.
Okay, describe for us what inappropriate sexual touching would be. Where are the boundaries?
I mean, I think you're looking for something that would be in some sort of inappropriate area, a private area. That's what I mean, that's the way I would define that.
Well, let me give you an example. Based on your understanding, would a male teacher grabbing a female student around her waist and pulling her into them, would that constitute the type of inappropriate touching that was prohibited by the district policy?
It could, yes.
Would a male teacher grabbing a student by the arm and pulling them in to give them a hug, could that constitute a violation of the policy?
It could, depending on the depth of it.
Depending on the what, sir?
Just the depth, what the circumstance was.
Okay, tell me the circumstances that made a difference, would make a difference in that case.
As you looked at the case, it was you were hearing all the different things that potentially could have come forward, and it's just a matter of were they intentionally to harm a kid or to touch them in an inappropriate way.
How were you trained to determine that? How were you trained, for example, let me make more specific. How were you trained to determine whether or not this might involve some sort of grooming conduct? How were you trained to determine that? I'm talking about your training. You said that it would depend on the circumstances. And I'm asking you to explain to the committee, what were you trained to look for to determine, as you put it, whether or not there was some sort of intent to harm the student in one of these cases that we've been talking about?
I would just say looking for continuous behavior along those lines.
All right. So if it was not a single incident, but multiple incidents of the same thing, that would be important because it might reflect grooming behavior. Is that what you were trained?
It could.
And were you also trained that to look for patterns of that sort of activity by the adult?
Yes.
And did you know that classroom also had high-rise tables with stools at it?
I did not recall the high-rise tables.
Did you ever go visit the classroom as part of your investigation?
I was in the classroom a lot. I was his evaluator as well.
I'm sorry?
I was his evaluator, so I had been in the classroom.
You were his evaluator? So you said you didn't really know Mr. Power, but you were his evaluator prior to the February events?
Means we're in the classrooms. We're in the classrooms, whether we're going through a lot with the student teacher at that point or not.
Yeah,
we've been in those classrooms. Yeah, we'd go in and out of classrooms. So I knew what the classroom looked like.
Okay, let me make sure that we get this clear though. Had you been in that classroom with Mr. Power in there teaching 7th and 8th grade students?
I can't recall, but I'm sure I'd had.
All right, you can't remember though that you actually ever visited his classroom while he was involved in teaching?
I can't recall.
And you did you visit his classroom after you had started your investigation in February of 2021 to observe him teaching students?
That had happened. You mean well, tell me about the timeline you're talking about.
between the time that you handed him a letter of direction and the time that he ultimately left the school
I
and was
had
no
not
longer
been back.
working there?
I
Sorry.
had not been in that classroom.
So let me just clarify that. I think what you said was, I had not been in the classroom.
I had not been in the classroom that I
So-
recall.
So were you or were you not monitoring him personally after you gave him the letter of direction?
I was not.
Was anyone monitoring him directly after you gave him the letter of direction?
I don't recall.
Well, who was in charge of communicating to Mr. Power the decisions that had been made about his conduct in February that were reported in February of 2021?
I mean,
Well, did you set up any sort of a monitoring program for him where somebody would be there in the class to see if he was following the direction?
I don't recall. I don't believe so.
How were you trained to use this form? What did they tell you were supposed to do when you got some sort of student raising a concern?
Well, students would fill them out to the best of their abilities, obviously, and then we would review the forms. And my practice was always take a few notes as far as things that came up that I want to address.
All right. And is this your handwriting at the top there that says call mom?
It is.
Is this your handwriting at the bottom where there's an asterisk and it says started crying immediately upon stating Mr. Powell's name?
That is correct.
And I've read that your handwriting correctly.
Correct.
All right. And did you understand that she was a seventh grader at the time?
I did.
And did you understand she was 12 years old?
Roughly, yeah.
That is either consistent with or in addition to what's on the form.
I don't believe there's anything additional. My normal practice would have been putting notes if there was something that wasn't there.
All right. So you're a note taker during the meetings.
I am.
There are items included in your ultimate letter of direction to Mr. Power that do not appear to be in any of these witness statements. Do you remember any student writing down that Mr. Power appears to target small, skinny girls?
I don't recall.
Do you remember that being in your letter, though, to Mr. Power himself?
I don't recall the exact verbiage in the letter.